You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. This is January 2nd, 2022, and this is episode 154 of Lighthearted, the first episode of the new year. Joining me as co-host today is Jeff Gales, Executive Director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. Hey, Jeff. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Jeremy.
So by way of full disclosure here, we're actually recording this on December 23rd, and I hope you're having a nice holiday season out there in the Pacific Northwest.
Yep, we got a nice, beautiful sunny day, and it's always green in the Pacific Northwest. We love that.
Well, I don't know about, I remember I was there a couple of years ago, and just after I left, you had a monumental blizzard, so it's usually green.
Okay, I'll clarify. It's usually green.
Well, here on the New Hampshire seacoast, we have a touch of snow, but I think it's going to be mostly a green or brown Christmas, but that's okay.
Right. Well, we're looking forward to 2022. It's looking like it's going to be a great year as we plan for the future. We're excited about the upcoming events and things that are going to be happening at the U.S. Lighthouse Society. So we're excited about 2022.
So, Jeff, has anything interesting happened on this date in lighthouse history?
Yes, something interesting did happen at the Gibraltar Lighthouse, Gibraltar Point Lighthouse in Toronto, which was built in 1808 and is the oldest lighthouse on the Great Lakes. On January 2nd, 1815, keeper John Paul Radmuller disappeared mysteriously. Legend has it that he was murdered by two soldiers, and some people say that Radmuller was buried on the property somewhere. His ghost is said to haunt the site.
Yeah, I think it's one of Toronto's more well-known ghost stories, as a matter of fact. Some versions of the story, I've read a few different versions. Some claim that those two soldiers attacked Radmuller because he wouldn't give them any more beer because they were too drunk. Some versions say they actually pushed him from the top of the tower to his death. But the details are sketchy, and some historians don't think the murder ever really happened. But it is a very famous legend, and as I said, it's probably Toronto's best-known ghost story. So, Jeff, to change the subject a little bit, I have a question for you. Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
I haven't, and I've never killed anybody because they ran out of beer.
Scotch maybe? I know you like your scotch.
No. I've never killed anybody over alcohol at all. But I've never been to the Bahamas. It's on my bucket list for sure. One of our longtime members and friend of mine, Darlene Chisholm, Darlene, her husband Tom, led a small group of society members out to the Bahamas a few years ago and had a nice time. But we've never actually gone there as a society, and I've never been there personally. You know, it's deceiving. The islands of the Bahamas are vast and in number. It's a very, very large geographic area, so difficult to see everything for sure.
Right. Yeah, spending a lot of time on boats for sure, but I would love to get there. Our main topic today is Paradise Island Lighthouse, also known as Hog Island Lighthouse in the Bahamas. We'll be listening to an interview I did recently with Toby Smith, who is developing a beach club, and he plans to restore the lighthouse as part of that. It's a really interesting project. It's kind of a David and Goliath story because one of the biggest cruise companies in the world is also claiming a lease on the very same beachfront property. Before we get to that, I wanted to mention that we featured the Elbow Reef Lighthouse at Hopetown in the Bahamas on one of the earlier episodes of this podcast. I interviewed Annie Potts of the Elbow Reef Lighthouse Society at that time. Jeff, I think you've had some contact with Annie and her organization over the years.
I have, and it would be interesting. We really need to follow up on see what's happening out there at Elbow Reef. Even before all the hurricane damage, they were having trouble. But Elbow Reef is fascinating because they actually are the last lighthouse in the world that I'm aware of that still lights the light using a traditional IOV burner, which is absolutely amazing. Whether they're doing that now, I don't know, but it's something we need to follow up on. But a fascinating lighthouse.
Absolutely, yeah. It is, to the best of my knowledge, the only lighthouse in the world that still has its, as you said, a kerosene lamp in use, and also its old rotation mechanism
Mm-hmm.
has to be hand wound by a resident keeper. I
Right.
know the
Yeah.
keeper's house was badly damaged in the hurricane a couple of years ago, and I think the keeper is living back on site now, but I could be wrong about that. But you're right; we do need to follow up on what the
Yeah.
latest is there.
Well, and also as within the United States, which is common, keepers' wives, keepers' kids took over lighthouse responsibilities when the keepers passed, and that holds true at Elbow Reef. It's been a family of keepers for many years out there.
Yeah, I've actually wanted to interview the present keeper. I think he'd be a great interview for the podcast. But
Absolutely.
but today we're going to be focusing on a different lighthouse there, the oldest lighthouse in the Bahamas. So Jeff, if you could please help me tell our listeners about Paradise Island Lighthouse.
Sure. Paradise Island in the Bahamas was formerly known as Hog Island. The island, with an area of about 685 acres, is located just offshore from the city of Nassau. The island was bought by the A&P supermarket heir Huntington Hartford in 1959, and the name was changed from Hog Island to Paradise Island. It's heavily developed and is best known today for the Atlantis Paradise Island Resort.
A lighthouse was built on Hog Island in 1817. The 68-foot tall white brick tower with a red lantern stands at the island's western tip. It was the first lighthouse constructed in the Bahamas. It was built prior to the formation of the Imperial Lighthouse Service, the agency that was responsible for the navigational aids in the colonies of the British Empire. All the other 11 lighthouses in the Bahamas were built by the Imperial Lighthouse Service.
And today it's usually referred to as Paradise Island Lighthouse or the Nassau Harbor Lighthouse, and it's considered the oldest standing lighthouse in the West Indies. It's been abandoned, unfortunately, since the 1980s and has fallen into disrepair.
Right. And after 8 years of waiting, the Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Company was offered and accepted a lease of Crown land in 2020. The lease includes 5 acres and two parcels, 2 acres around the lighthouse and 3 acres on the beach. Toby Smith of the Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Company aims to restore the lighthouse and to create a sustainable, low impact beach club on the site and to make the site accessible to all.
Yes, and Royal Caribbean Cruise Line is also claiming the same land. The plans for a large beach club are in the works. An organization called Save the Bays objects to Royal Caribbean Cruise Line's large scale plan because of the damage they believe it would cause to the fragile environment out there.
And several organizations, including the Protect Our Islands Fund, Re-Earth, the Bahamas National Trust, and the Elbow Reef Lighthouse Society, have expressed support for Toby Smith and the Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Club. I recently had a chance to speak with Toby Smith via Zoom, so let's listen to that now. I'm speaking this afternoon with Toby Smith in the Bahamas, where I understand it's a lot warmer than it is here in New Hampshire. It is no surprise since it's the middle of November. Toby has a really interesting project in the works, which involves the Paradise Island Lighthouse. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes here. Thanks so much for joining me today, Toby.
Well, thank you very much for having me today, Jeremy. I appreciate it. And yes, it is indeed warm in the Bahamas. I bring you greetings from the warm country.
Well, thank you. Send some of that warmth up this way, please. I need it
Roger
badly right now. Yeah. So first of all, before we get into specifics, I'd like to know a little bit more about your background. If you could tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to start this Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Company.
I'm a born Bahamian. I was born in the Bahamas and grew up most of my life here, some of it in England, a year of it in Houston. And I decided to drop out of school at 19 and come back to the Bahamas to make my fortune. So I've been through a number of professions. And my profession now is as an entrepreneur that I'm trying to develop this Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Club project. I was in financial services for 15 years. I was a mechanic. I was a captain. And it's been my dream to become the lighthouse keeper of Paradise Island Lighthouse.
That sounds good to me. Lighthouse keeper at Paradise Island. I don't know if you can get any better than that. I know it's a fairly complicated situation. There's actually some news you told me about a few minutes ago related to all this, and we'll get into that. But first of all, I understand you have an agreement with the Bahamian government to develop a beach club on Colonial Beach, which is near the western end of Paradise Island in the area that includes the lighthouse. Can you tell me a little bit more about the agreement you made with the government?
Yeah, that's right. So on the western end of Paradise Island, it was formerly known as Hog Island. And as you come into Nassau Harbor, just on the north side of the harbor is Paradise Island. And on the western tip is what was Hog Island is now Paradise Island Lighthouses, is commonly referred to name. I realized that it was situated on Crown land. So on the very western tip, you have the lighthouse, and then further along, there is about 17 acres in total of Bahamian Crown land. So that is land that was vested by the Queen of England as head of our Commonwealth, with the fiduciary responsibility of the Bahamian government to protect and either not use it or use it for the best purpose for the benefit of as many Bahamians as possible. Mm-hmm. So back in 2012, I applied to the government of the Bahamas for said Crown land, and that went on where I was applying and following up with my application to crystallize in a Crown land lease agreement between my company and the government of the Bahamas. So I received a Crown land lease after 8 years of waiting on the 7th of January 2020. And I was instructed as per the cover letter to sign, seal, witness, accept all terms, or I accepted all terms and delivered it back to them on the 9th of January 2020.
And what is your vision for a beach club at that site?
The reason I wanted some beach areas to create a beach club, and the revenues from the beach club partially will be used towards the restoration of the lighthouse. So this whole business model, I don't believe that the lighthouse will have enough space as capacity to generate the millions of dollars that's going to be needed to restore it. Mm-hmm. So the application was made at the same time for 3 acres on the beach to develop a beach club where you can come over and have a burger and a beer and experience the Bahamian sunshine and go for a dip in our lovely ocean. So that all combined together is 5 acres, 2 acres of ground land around the lighthouse, 3 acres on the beach. And the main objective is to have the lighthouse restored back to its 1817 glory and be able to have a Bahamian owned and operated cultural historical site where Bahamians and our guests can enjoy it together.
And meanwhile, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, or Caribbean, how do you say Caribbean or Caribbean?
I say Caribbean, but to each their own.
Yeah, I actually usually do say Caribbean, but
yeah,
you're Caribbean a lot too. But anyway, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line has been acquiring land or working to acquire land on the island, on Paradise Island, and they're planning to build a very large beach club there. Aside from the fact that you were actually promised the land before they came into the picture, what to you is objectionable about what Royal Caribbean Cruise Line is planning to do?
Well, my primary objection is that the past administration of government has also, a year and a half after they offered me a lease for the property, also then offered 3 acres of the same land, which is my complete area of my beach club.
Right.
They offered it to Royal Caribbean in the form of a Crown land lease a year and a half after I'd already accepted the government's offer. So it's really the previous administration of government that really put, or pitted, I should say, my project against Royal Caribbean's project. And I think that what the gentlemanly, honorable thing for Royal Caribbean would be to do is to understand that, okay, it's already been spoken for a Bahamian, and we have to respect that. And we also have to respect the laws and the Supreme Court of the Bahamas, given that a writ has been filed to discontinue negotiations with the government for any land that's in litigation. But Royal Caribbean are clearly acting as royalty, and they believe that if they stamp their feet hard enough, that we will then have to bow down to them as Bahamians and give them what they want.
And what is the latest news that you were just telling me about today?
The latest news on the front page of the business section of the Tribune newspaper is that they've received information that Royal Caribbean's lease is for a duration of at least 150 years. So just to put that into perspective, the Bahamas has been independent from England for less than 50 years. And the previous administration is already selling us down the river by many generations to a foreign corporation that has already exploited the Bahamas for the past 50 years. And Bahamians really have nothing to show for it. So the difference between what Royal Caribbean are trying to do is that they're trying to seize land that's already within my lease, that's Crown land. And they're also trying to get planning permission, building zone approval to change the land that they've bought, which is private residential land, to commercial land. And then it seems as though it was an afterthought that they said, well, if there's Crown land there, let's try and snatch that up too.
So it would seem that the government favors foreign investors over Bahamian projects, would you say?
It would seem that way, yes. And, you know, the plot thickens. And while the Bahamas was actually officially declared a pirates' republic in the early 1700s, it seems as though it's not only left its mark, but also left its method. So you see movies of, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean, and now we're having to be faced with what's the next league, which is apparently Royal Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right. Well, that's
the sequel.
Yeah, right. So just I was just thinking of something, just to clarify something for me. Where is Royal Caribbean Cruise Line based?
That's an interesting question, because it depends on how you ask that question for their own, I guess, liability and tax efficiency, right? So, you know, these billion-dollar corporations hire multi-million-dollar lawyers to see how they can get away from having to have a multi-billion-dollar tax liability. So they're certainly not headquartered in the Bahamas, although some of their ships use the Bahamas registry for their flag. But I understand that they had to scrap construction of Royal Caribbean's headquarters in Miami due to cash flow issues.
So if Royal Caribbean Cruise Line established, that's a big if, I think, but if they were to establish their resort there, who would use it? Is their idea that it would mostly be for their own cruise passengers?
Yeah, they've publicly actually stated that it will be exclusively for their royal passengers. And they've also gone beyond that in stating that Bahamians will not be able to use the resort while their royal ships are in port. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know why they would want to segregate Bahamians. I mean, we've had enough segregation in the world rather than more cohesive togetherness. And while Royal Caribbean wishes to promote segregation of Bahamians, I don't know what their motivation behind it is. And they're saying that when their ships are not in port, then they will give Bahamians a special rate. Huh. So they've got a big carrot on the stick that they think the Bahamians are going to bite onto, where the government has sold Bahamians out in promising Royal Caribbean a Crown land lease for at least 150 years, where Royal Caribbean can decide when Bahamians can go over there, and Bahamians are going to have to pay to use our own Crown land beach.
Royal Caribbean Cruise Line and other cruise lines have certainly developed other destinations, resorts, and so forth in the Bahamas.
Right.
Has the money from those developments helped the economy of the Bahamas?
I'd say no to hardly anything. So in technical terms, the measure of revenues that are generated in the Bahamas that are then immediately exported out of the Bahamas, such as cruise revenue, revenue generated from cruise passengers. The cruise lines export between 80 and 85% of the revenues, which is termed as being what's called leakage. So it's not really within the cruise line's best interest to be in the world bragging of how much they generate in the Bahamas and actually export out, but it is known to be between 80 and 85%. So the cruise lines aren't motivated to share that data. The government have not, I understand, done a leakage audit since 2006, I think it was. So nobody that needs to know the real picture really has the real picture. But no, it doesn't help the Bahamas in general. I mean, we might get jobs cleaning toilets on these private islands. We might get jobs doing landscape maintenance. But Royal Caribbean recently wished to brag that they're moving away from 60%, or their increase. So it's only 60% of the Bahamians on what was called Coco Key, or what is called Coco Key by Royal Caribbean, is Bahamian workers. They bring the workers off of the ship to serve people food, to do bartending, and Bahamians have to stand by cleaning toilets and watch all these foreign workers come off the ship and assist Royal Caribbean maximizing their profits.
Are there any other reasons you feel your plan for that site is better than what Royal Caribbean Cruise Line intends to do?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, they say they want to, pave paradise and put in a deck chair or a swimming pool and whatnot right in front of the ocean. They want to put in big docks, which is going to alter the flow of current of water, both on the north side where the beach hydraulics are, such a dynamic that's why we have a beach. We don't need them messing with it. But why is mine better than theirs? It's because they're looking at putting 3,500 people there, which undoubtedly they'll then lift that capacity to be even greater. And that puts a strain on the environment of where does all that garbage that's generated, all that sewage that's produced and needs to be treated, where does it all go? Whereas my project is a sustainable project. We're looking at working in harmony with nature. It's going to be 100% owned and operated by Bahamians. The revenue generated is going to stay in the Bahamas. There's many things in there where at the end of it, we're going to get not only this lighthouse restored back to its former glory, but then we want to be able to employ that success of business model into the other 11 lighthouses in the Bahamas so that we can attract more lighthouse tourism and generate a greater sense of pride for our historical monuments.
And following up on what you just said, I understand you have the backing of some citizens groups and environmental groups also.
Right. So the Bahamas National Trust has kindly provided me with written support. The Pilot Boat Association of New Providence, which is the pilot boats that shuttle these cruise ships and freight boats in and out, they've given me written support. Re-Earth is an environmental group. They've given me written support, as well as Save the Bays, Protect Our Islands funds. The major resorts here are standing beside me. The press has been very receptive to making sure that there's balanced and prominent coverage of what's going on as this story develops. So I'm receiving, a lot of support is coming behind this, and I'm proud of that support.
Is there room for both your beach club and the larger club that the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines want to develop? Is there room for both?
Yeah, I mean, physically there's room for both, but it just depends on the level of greed of Royal Caribbean. So they bought approximately 13.5 acres that borders the Crown land that's zoned for private residential area.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get the zoning of the private residential to commercial, then, I mean, that's to me where their concentration should be. And in front of that private residential area, they have approximately 1,100 linear feet of beach. So they can put their guests on that. Now, they are completely running over my beach parcel, which is 3 acres, because allegedly it's contained within the 7-acre agreement that they made with government a year and a half after mine.
Mm-hmm.
So can we coexist? If the Bahamian government is supported by the Bahamian people, that's what the Bahamian people want, that RCL have to downsize their plans and stop encroaching on my land so that I can succeed, then that would be for the favor of the Bahamian people. I think that RCL, in making a land grab attempt at running roughshod over my development, doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and it's a threat to the development of the Bahamas. So I think that RCL need to back down from their provocative and contentious moves. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to be looking at them continuing wishing to negotiate with the government something that's in litigation. And if it's deemed by the court that when it's deemed by the court, hopefully, that my lease is valid, then I'll have a 3-acre beach parcel, and RCL are going to be forced to have to reconsider and redesign their operation. So I've drawn the line in the sand, and rather than being contentious and trying to run roughshod, I'd much rather have a harmonious relationship with my potential neighbor.
Makes sense. So this is a podcast that's supposed to be about lighthouses. So probably we've touched on the lighthouse, but we haven't talked a lot about it yet. And I want to hear about your plans for the lighthouse specifically. But before we get into that, you mentioned that it was built in 1817. It's over 200 years old, which is
right.
Quite old. And I understand it was built before the branch of Trinity House in England that maintained colonial lights, right? It actually came before that. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yes. So but before the Imperial Lighthouse Service was servicing the Bahamas, Hog Island Lighthouse cornerstone was laid in 1816. Construction was completed in 1817, and the next lighthouse that was built did fall under the Imperial Lighthouse Service, and that was, I believe, Hole in the Wall Abaco Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I may, the history of lighthouses in the Bahamas is phenomenal, and obviously we cover a vast area of ocean, and it's right in the middle of key channels, the old Bahama Channel to the south of us that runs north of Cuba to go into the Gulf Stream and whatnot and into the Gulf of Mexico. And then, to cut down on sailing to come through the Bahamas to get to Florida and the East Coast. So the Bahamas has gone through sort of wreck and ruin, right? So we've been battered by hurricanes, but then we've had the fortune of the spills of piracy, and then rum running and prohibition came around and whatnot. So we've gone from rags to riches a few times. But what was happening back in those days was a popular industry was actually wrecking. So as ships wrecked on our shores, reefs, shoals, islands, then whoever could be the fastest person out there to get to the wreck would save lives, but get the spoils of the cargo. That then led to who has the fastest boat to get to the wrecks, and that's how regattas in the Bahamas gained such popularity, because they had fast boats to race against each other. So, because the merchant navy, mainly out of England, were losing so many ships, they really wanted, and the wreckers taking the spoils, they really wanted to improve the lighthouse network in the Bahamas to assist with navigation.
There's a lighthouse in the Bahamas that I believe is the only lighthouse still operating with kerosene as its fuel and has a resident keeper. That would be Elbow Reef Lighthouse.
That's exactly right, which is an Abaco, and they actually got smashed almost just over 2 years ago by
Yes.
Hurricane Dorian. So the Elbow Reef Lighthouse, or also known as the Hopetown Lighthouse, has an amazing history, and it is the only kerosene fired hand wound lighthouse left operational in the world.
Yes.
However, the San Salvador Lighthouse in the Bahamas has been made with an electric bulb, but the apparatus for the hand wound kerosene fed light is still there. So the Bahamas potentially could have the last two hand wound kerosene fired lighthouses left in the world. And unfortunately, San Salvador is it's run by the government, and that's where we're at. It's become electrified.
I interviewed Annie Potts, who's involved with the Elbow Reef Lighthouse Society. Interviewed her for the podcast not long after that hurricane, and haven't heard anything lately. I hope they're mostly recovered from that.
Well, recovery is a big word. So,
yeah, I know.
The keeper, Mr. Forbes, is actually back at the lighthouse, and he now does have a roof on his place, which is great. They're concentrating now on they're building out the dock, I believe, and they're building back the outbuildings. And they just announced last week that they have an office in town. Mm-hmm. So that is. Annie Potts is an absolute gem. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's traveled extensively. She's written Last Lights, the hand-wound lighthouses of the Bahama Islands.
Yes, yes.
And that whole team that is mainly volunteers that are keeping the light shining at Elbow Reef is absolutely phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was super impressed by everything I found out about them. I'm glad to hear Mr. Forbes, the keeper, is back at the lighthouse there. That's good news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So back to the Paradise Island, what was previously known as the Hog Island Lighthouse. There is no keeper's house there. Was there a keeper's house at one time?
There is a shell of a keeper's quarters there now.
Okay.
It was more extensive, where there are actually two buildings. One of those buildings have since gone. There is the quarry pit there over there still, where they quarried out the limestone and hand sawed blocks that they used to build the tower of the lighthouse, and also the keeper's quarters and some water systems. So the keeper's quarters walls are still up. Our plan is to completely restore it, hopefully using also traditional methods and materials. To tie in Abaco into that, we want to use pine trees that were blown over due to Hurricane Dorian, or saltwater intrusion just killed out, thousands of acres of pine trees, to use felled pine for our restoration efforts. So sort of the rafters, the roofing material, paneling, etc. I think that would bring some dignity and respect to remember those that we lost in Hurricane Dorian.
And what will the restored keeper's house be used for?
So to take it back to how it was in 1817, we want to have it back so that people can see it as sort of like a museum piece and do tours through it, etc. And then we're going to mirror that same building and make it look exactly like the original keeper's quarters, and build a second building next to it, which will have a mechanical room, and also have a small office in there, but then a kitchen and a bar, so people can pull up to the dock and sit in the tavern and walk around and have a tour going on in from their phone app, and be able to go up inside the lighthouse and see the view and have an explanation of the forts and other buildings that you can see from the top of the lighthouse.
Wow, sounds good to me. So the lighthouse is not an aid to navigation currently, right?
Yeah, it's got a very dim 12-volt bulb that is a harbor marker that flashes white flash every 5 seconds, but it's about I don't know. I mean, a candle might put out more candle watt power than the light bulb that's up there now, unfortunately.
But are there plans? Do you plan to restore it to being more of a, let's say, a real aid to navigation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the plan, Jeremy. It would be to put in a proper naval brass Fresnel lens operation where it's actually a gentleman in South Florida that takes pride in doing these restorations.
Dan Spinella.
Yeah, I've touched base with him. I found him on the internet, and I'm itching to go to get something actually. So I mean, just the light alone, when we spoke and sort of compared notes, just to give you some indication, that's about $85,000 stateside for an authentic lamp.
Well, he does phenomenal work, and I would love to see what he would do for that lighthouse.
Yeah. Well, that's the plan, is to have it fully restored, use authentic materials, and have it, people with authentic period costumes of that time.
Wow. Not to dwell on Royal Caribbean Cruise Line's ideas about this place, but what have they said about the lighthouse? Do they have any plans for the lighthouse?
Well, originally their lawyer said that they'd applied for all of the western end of Paradise Island, so that would have included the lighthouse. But I think several reasons. One, because it's going to involve a lot of money that's going to be an added expense for Royal Caribbean. But I think maybe they've pulled back from their interest in the lighthouse. And truly, I think that's sort of like capturing the castle for Bahamians. We don't have formal castles, but when you have these feuding clans, I mean, they invade your territory and then take your highest position. I think proverbially that's sort of what they were trying to do, but they've eased up off of that idea. But I think that it's very achievable. I don't think it's an unreasonable objective to have it perform not only as a navigational aid, but the 7 million tourists that came into our harbor in 2019 in cruise ships, they are seeing a very dilapidated, sad state of affairs for our oldest lighthouse in the, I wouldn't say Caribbean, because the Bahamas isn't in the Caribbean, but certainly the West Indies.
Well, I know Lighthouse will become even more of a destination for lighthouse buffs too, I would say, when this happens.
I certainly hope so. And the other thing is that, historical tourism is a growing market. People that are looking to get back to nature is a growing market. I'm not looking at, having 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people all, shuttling around the island. I want to have nature trails. I'd like it to be idyllic and quiet and have good native bushes, a shade coverage, and just a beautiful spot that really doesn't need to be paved and put in water slides and swimming pools and 50 boat trips going back and forth the harbor every day.
Why does this lighthouse need to be preserved? And part two of that, what does it mean to the Bahamas? What does that lighthouse represent?
Wow, that's a really big question, the second part of that. So why do I feel the Bahamas should be, the lighthouse should be preserved? Because it's part of our culture, it's part of our history, it's old. A lot of our pre-independence that occurred in 1973, a lot of our pre-independence history really isn't well maintained or taught. And it's up to us as we age to make sure that we protect our heritage for future generations. Is it not? I mean, we have a responsibility to future generations. So it's the preservation of our history, of our culture. We're a seafaring nation, and we need, relics and representations of us being a seafaring nation. I would like to become the lighthouse keeper, and there's many families that have been connected to lighthouse keepers, either through the Imperial Lighthouse Service in serving on the lighthouse maintenance ship, or in actually being lighthouse keepers in these far away, remote places where the stories are just phenomenal. When you sit down and, oh, my grandfather was a lighthouse keeper in Niagara, and we used to go down there every summer. And to keep all of that history alive, where there's so many connections to the 12 lighthouses in the Bahamas.
If you could recap, what is the current status of the battle over that land, and where does it stand now, and what do you think is likely to happen next?
The current status is that I filed a writ with the Supreme Court of the Bahamas on the 18th of May, 2020. And we've been through the case management hearing. And then I have to wait for the for March of 2022 for the actual court case hearing to commence. And hopefully it will just be a 2-day trial where at the end of it, the justice rules in favor that my lease is valid and that I can continue on without fear of interruption or objection.
Well, March is not that far away. And,
It's not. Meanwhile, though, I mean, Royal Caribbean are sailing in on their ship and they're trying to woo the government and impress them with their brand new Odyssey of the Seas and private jets and shiny beads. So we just got to see if Royal Caribbean want to throw bait out and see if the politicians snap it up. Or I believe it's a New Day government that's in place now and they're not looking to sell out Bahamians. The Progressive Liberal Party, who are in power now, are more nationalistic, whereas the Free National Movement, who are the past administration, I think were rather desperate and happy to sell us out for a couple of pieces of silver. You asked me the question, the second part of the question, what does it mean to the Bahamas? What does this lighthouse and other lighthouses mean? It's really a special place out there, Jeremy. It's a magical place. To me, there's almost there is a spiritual connection. The energy out there is unique. I've experienced the feeling of that same sort of mystical feeling in Machu Picchu in Peru, which the Incas obviously picked that for a reason. But what does it mean to the Bahamas? I think the lighthouses are a really good representation of hope. And being out on a rough sea in the dead of night on a stormy night, in seeing the reassurance of your dead reckoning by seeing a lighthouse confirming your position out there, and that life is still continuing on. That's the bigger meaning to me of what lighthouses represent. And it's used, the Hopetown Lighthouses, the image is used in our advertising, it's used on our money, it's used in many instances. But how do the lighthouses benefit from that exposure? And I want to bring benefit to our lighthouses and hopefully be able to form a maintenance fund so that we can continue to have lighthouses in the Bahamas.
That sums up your objectives and philosophy pretty nicely, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a petition that I saw online, a petition that people can sign to show their support of your efforts. Can you tell me about that? And in general, how can people learn more about your project?
Oh, lovely. Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Jeremy. So yes, there is a petition out there. It's got about approximately 22,600 signatures. It's by change.org and it is Save Paradise Island Lighthouse. We have a Facebook page, which is Paradise Hog Island Lighthouse and Beach Club. And all of the information is on our website. There is a section there for media. So the latest stories that come out are updated in there. It has our mission statement. So all of the details, my phone number is on there. And, we really appreciate the United States Lighthouse Society and you especially in taking interest in our project and in our Bahamian lighthouses. And I'd really like to demonstrate to the world that there are very enthusiastic Bahamians that support this project. And across the globe, I've been receiving support, not just from Bahamians, but the general public out there. So I really appreciate the support. It's very encouraging. Sometimes it does feel as though it's just me fighting this battle and it's a David versus Goliath scenario. And I'm comforted that we all know what happened with David and Goliath story.
Exactly. Yeah, we know how that ended. So that bodes well. Just to clarify, you mentioned your website, and I think the address or URL is actually paradiseislandlighthouse.com.
Paradiseislandlighthouse.com. Yes. Or Google Toby Smith Bahamas, and there's lots of news stories in there. Yes. And the Lighthouse webpage itself. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and I just really really appreciate all the support we've been receiving.
Well,
oh, and I might add, if any of your listeners feel so compelled to say, like, who can we write to? The Prime Minister of the Bahamas email is primeminister@bahamas.gov.bs. So primeminister@bahamas.golf.oscar.violet.bravo.sierra.
Some people might have other ideas about what the BS part of it is, but I probably shouldn't get into that.
Well, Bahamian, it's rather ironic that all of the government domain is .gov.bs. So I'll let everyone make their own conclusion on that one. But I'm in my 10th year, and this is all associated with the previous government. So I'm hoping, and I've got good faith in this new government.
Yeah.
That it was led by Philip Brave Davis as Prime Minister, and he is the Minister of Crown Lands. He's got the fiduciary responsibility from the Queen, and I believe that his best interest is Bahamians at heart.
Mm-hmm. I have one final question for you, and this one's for bonus points. All right.
Right. Okay.
And the question is, why is this project so important to you?
Gee, that's a big question. Why is it so important to me? It became sort of a romantic, wouldn't it be cool to be a lighthouse keeper? And it's really evolved into, I can't apply for the job because it's not existing. So I've got to create the opportunity. I've got to go through leaps and bounds to try and pull off getting, the land through the Crown land. And then came along Royal Caribbean. So why is it so important to me? I've raised my kid all these years. I mean, she's 19 now, to never give up, keep trying. So I'm not about to give up. And, I get a call probably every day from somebody saying, boy, Toby, don't you give up. You hang in there and you don't let people shove you around. And we admire what you're doing and we admire your tenacity. And so why is it so important to me? Because I've made it my mission to get it done. I've taken on lots of projects in the Bahamas and, helping out in other parts of the world that I enjoy a challenge, I suppose.
What happened is that you wrote to the U.S. Lighthouse Society and the email was forwarded to me, and I was hooked right away. I started reading the articles about it and everything. And it's pretty obvious. I also watched an interview with you on YouTube. And if anybody starts reading those stories or hears this interview, I think too, they're gonna know you're a force to be reckoned with, and I know you're not going to back down, and I really believe you're going to succeed. So it's a great story, and I honestly look forward to the positive outcome, and I look forward to going there someday.
Well, you're definitely invited, and all of your listeners and followers are definitely invited also. I mean, we're not officially open. We actually had a guy heard about my story, contacted me, kept it a secret that he wanted to propose to his girlfriend up there. Came in a couple of weeks ago. We had our first engagement.
Oh, wow.
They went there as boyfriend and girlfriend and left as fiancés, and they said it was the best. So yeah, we took them out there, me and my dogs. And anyone that's listening, I'm very accessible. I'm very honest and open and transparent. And I really, I think that doing things the right way rather than cutting corners or, paying off bribes or, whatever else comes your way. I think that always taking the moral high ground. I learned from a very contentious divorce that, always take the moral high ground. So I've taken that all the way along it. And it's really it's a testament of my patience being almost 10 years in.
Well, I like the way you think about all this.
Thank you. It's very flattering.
Well, you're very welcome. And thank you so much, Toby Smith, for spending this time with me today. I look forward to checking back with you and seeing what's happening. I'm certainly going to follow this closely. And once the positive outcome of the court case is behind you, maybe we can talk again for the podcast.
Absolutely. Have a little snifter of rum together, perhaps. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I admire what you're doing and what the U.S. Lighthouse Society is doing. And I appreciate your listeners having the patience and the interest to listen in. Thank you.
You can read more about the Paradise Island Lighthouse and Beach Club online at paradiseislandlighthouse.com. And there's a quote from the website, quote, "Once complete, the lighthouse will be a shining example of Bahamians coming together to create something magical," unquote.
You know, it's pretty hard to listen to Toby tell his story and to not root for him to accomplish his goals. Hopefully the legal system and the government of the Bahamas will do the right thing, and he'll be able to move forward in the development of the beach club and the restoration of the lighthouse. I also want to add that people can learn more about the tours and everything else the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers by checking out uslhs.org. If you listen to this podcast on a platform that allows you to post reviews, please rate and review us.
To everyone out there who works to save lighthouses or any historic structures, thank you for what you do. We're all on the same team.
Thank you so much for co-hosting again today, Jeff. And to everyone, as always, thanks for listening and
keep a good light.
All in my house, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.